I never thought I'd be the guy to find out my wife, Lisa, was cheating on me. We've been married for 5 years, and honestly, I thought things were pretty solid. We had our usual ups and downs, but I always believed in the idea that if you love someone and work on it, you can get through anything. That's what I told myself anyway. But lately, I'd started noticing little things. She was more distant, spending a lot more time on her phone, and she'd get defensive if I asked what she was doing. I figured she was just stressed with work or maybe just bored, but deep down I knew something was off. The first real sign was the happiness audit records. Our community was part of this social harmony initiative, which was basically a government program to keep everyone smiling and satisfied. They had these happiness scores. Everyone had to go through regular assessments, and it was supposed to measure our well-being. But as I looked into her latest records, I saw something strange. Her scores were artificially inflated. She was giving herself the highest ratings, but when I looked deeper, I saw that her satisfaction sources were all listed as family, career, and community service, but I could tell from her behavior that she wasn't truly happy with any of those. What really caught my eye was a record of her satisfaction scores from last month. She given herself a perfect 10 on everything. It didn't sit right. I remember sitting for hours, going over the details, trying to understand what was going on. I knew the system wasn't perfect, but these ratings seemed manipulated, almost like she was trying to hide something. I started to suspect that her happiness wasn't coming from the things she claimed. And then I remembered something else. She'd been acting weird around her emotional compliance officer. That's what they call the social harmony enforcers these days. They're supposed to keep everyone in line, make sure folks aren't reporting negative feelings, or at least keep the official happiness levels high. One night I decided to check her phone. Honestly, I'd been suspicious for a while, but I never wanted to believe she'd cheat. I just wanted to confirm if she was hiding something. I found a message thread with a contact saved under a pseudonym, Illy. The messages weren't explicit. At first, just casual talk about meeting up, but then I saw plans for a night out, and a few intimate messages that made my stomach drop. She was cheating. I saw enough to know that Lisa was sneaking around with this guy, and from her messages it looked like they'd been doing this for a while. She'd always been bitchy and dismissive when I tried to talk about her mood swings, but now I saw she'd been lying to me about everything: her happiness, her fidelity, her life. I was furious, but mostly hurt. It was like my whole understanding of her, of us, was just a lie. I felt betrayed on a level I couldn't even put into words. I wanted to confront her right then, but I knew I needed a plan. I needed to catch her in the act, or at least have undeniable evidence. This wasn't just about her cheating. It was about the ultimate breach of trust. She'd lied about everything, even her happiness, hiding her infidelity behind those fake scores and smiling photos. I sat there in the dark, clutching her phone, trying to process what I just found, knowing that everything was about to change. The next day I woke up with a storm of emotions: anger, betrayal, sadness. I couldn't even tell which was worse. It wasn't just that she cheated. It was that she did it so brazenly, so dismissively. Like she thought she could get away with it forever, hiding behind her fake happiness scores and her bitchy attitude whenever I questioned her mood. I knew I had to act carefully, so I started planning my next move. First, I wanted more proof. I couldn't confront her with just the messages. I needed to catch her in the act. I decided to set up a little sting, as cold and calculated as that sounds. I installed a recording app on her phone, just in case she slipped up and made a mistake, and I also started monitoring her online activity more closely. I knew she'd probably cover her tracks, but I had a feeling she'd slip up, especially when she was with Eli. It didn't take long. Within a couple of days, I caught her at it again. She was texting him late into the night, talking about meeting up at a local hotel. Her messages were flirty, suggestive, and she even mentioned needing a break from the fake happiness she was forced to project. It was a punch to the gut. She'd been living a double life, pretending to be this perfect wife, all the while sneaking off to cheat on me with her emotional compliance officer's side piece. I had never felt so insignificant, so worthless. It was like I was invisible to her, just some guy she married out of obligation, not love. I remember sitting there, staring at her screen, my fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. I knew I had to do something, but I also knew I couldn't just blow up without thinking through my next steps. She was bitchy, yes, but she was also manipulative. I had to be smart. I decided I would gather all my evidence, then confront her in a way that she couldn't spin her way out of. I wanted her to realize I wasn't some naive idiot who'd accept her lies anymore. That night I waited until she was back home and in bed. I kept my phone hidden and recorded her conversation with Eli. It was revealing. She was full of excuses, saying she needed to escape, wanted to feel alive again, and she kept insisting that their affair was just a way to get some genuine happiness. I felt like I was watching a nightmare unfold, and I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. The woman I loved, who I'd trusted with everything, was out there lying, sneaking, cheating, the very things she claimed she hated about other people. When she finally fell asleep, I quietly packed her bags. I didn't want to humiliate her physically, but I wanted her to see that her actions had consequences. I left her a note on the bed. I know everything. Don't come back. Don't bother lying. You're not the person I thought you were. I told myself it was a clean break, that I was doing this for my own dignity, but honestly, it hurt like hell. The betrayal hit me so deep that I questioned everything. How could she do this? Was I ever enough? I spent the night staring at the ceiling, replaying the last few days in my mind, trying to figure out how I'd let this happen, how I'd missed the signs. The woman I married turned out to be someone I didn't even recognize anymore. It was a brutal wake-up call. And as I lay there, I realized I was also angry at myself for not seeing it sooner. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let her get away with it, not without paying some sort of price. I was done being the fool in this story. The fallout was immediate and intense. The moment she saw the note, Lisa's bitchy mask shattered, replaced by pure rage. She stormed into the living room, her face twisted with fury, her voice sharp and venomous. "You're crazy. You think I'd just leave without explaining. You're overreacting as usual." She tried to deny everything, brushing aside my evidence as just paranoia, but I could see the desperation in her eyes. She knew she was caught, and her standoffish attitude only confirmed it. I didn't want to argue. I'd made up my mind. I told her I knew about Eli, about the hotel plans, about the fake happiness scores. Her reaction was a mix of dismissiveness and outright denial. "You're being paranoid," she snapped. "You're just jealous or insecure. I don't know what your problem is." She kept lying, throwing up excuses, saying she needed a break, that I was too controlling, that I was reading too much into it. But I wasn't buying her bullshit anymore. I'd seen enough. The most surreal moment was when she looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You're nothing without me anyway. Who else would put up with your boring ass?" That hit harder than anything else. I felt the sting of her words deep in my chest, the kind of blow that makes you question your entire worth. But I also felt something else, anger, pure and unfiltered. How dare she talk like that after everything? How dare she dismiss everything we'd built like it was nothing? That was the moment I knew I couldn't stay. I told her to get out. I packed her bags myself, her bitchy attitude still on full display, but I didn't care. I was done. I watched her walk out the door, her heels tapping on the hardwood, her eyes full of contempt. As she disappeared down the street, I knew I was finally free from the web of lies she'd spun. But the aftermath hit me hard. I was left with a hollow feeling, like I'd lost part of myself. I kept replaying every conversation, every sign I'd missed, wondering how I'd been so blind. I was angry, hurt, and confused all at once, but I also felt relief, like I'd just escaped a trap I didn't even realize I was in. Over the next few days, I started to piece myself back together. I threw myself into work, trying to drown out the emptiness. I also revisited those happiness audit records, those artificially inflated scores that she'd used to hide her true feelings. It dawned on me, they'd been a facade, a mask that covered her real dissatisfaction, her secret affair, her thirst for excitement she couldn't get from her happy life. I realized how much she'd been forcing herself to appear content, all while secretly craving something else. I also began to see that her bitchy attitude was just a defense mechanism, her way of controlling her own misery, her way of hiding her shame. As much as I hated her for what she did, I couldn't help but feel a little pity for her. She was trapped in her own lies, just as I had been blind to them, but I also knew I had to protect myself from falling into the same trap again. Trust, once broken like this, is nearly impossible to rebuild, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to try. That's when I started thinking about my next move. Do I try to forgive her? Do I cut her out completely? I wasn't sure yet, but I knew one thing. I deserved better than someone who would lie, cheat, and pretend to be happy just to keep appearances. I learned the hard way that fake happiness is worse than no happiness at all. It's a lie, and lies eventually come out. I was just glad I found out before I got more deeply involved in her deception. I'd been a fool, but I wasn't going to be that fool forever. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Every day felt like walking a tightrope. Part of me wanted to go after her, to demand answers, to fight for what we had. The other part, the more rational part, knew that she had crossed a line I couldn't ignore. I found myself oscillating between anger and numbness, trying to process the betrayal that had shattered everything I believed in. I kept replaying the moments, her dismissive attitude, her lies, that cold look in her eyes when she denied everything. It was like I was watching a different person, someone I didn't recognize. I started digging into the social harmony initiative more, wanting to understand how her happiness scores had been manipulated, why she felt the need to hide her true feelings. That's when I learned about the emotional compliance officer system. These government enforcers supposed to keep people in check, make sure everyone reported acceptable levels of happiness. But what struck me was how these scores could be used to mask real dissatisfaction. Lisa's scores had been artificially inflated, but her true feelings, the ones she was hiding from everyone, came out in her secret texts and her late-night meetups. It was clear she'd been living a double life, pretending to be satisfied on paper but craving something else entirely. One night, I decided to confront her again, not with anger this time, but with cold clarity. I reached out to her, told her I knew about her affair with Eli, about her fake happiness scores, about how she'd been lying not only to me but to herself. I told her I wasn't interested in her excuses anymore, that her manipulation, her lies had cost her everything. I wanted her to understand that I wasn't going to let her keep fooling herself or me. I was tired of being played the fool, tired of pretending I hadn't seen the signs. Her reaction was exactly what I expected, bitchy, dismissive, full of lies. She denied everything, spun stories about how I was insecure or jealous, how I didn't understand her. She called me paranoid, crazy, and told me I was overreacting, but I wasn't buying it. I could see the truth in her eyes, that flicker of guilt and defiance. I told her to stop lying, to face what she'd done. It was clear she was terrified of losing control, of facing the reality she'd created for herself. That's when she finally snapped, calling me possessive and insecure, trying to turn the tables and make me feel guilty. But I had my evidence now, and I wasn't about to let her manipulate me anymore. I told her I was done, that I wanted her out of my life if she wasn't going to be honest. I did want her fake happiness, her lies, or her betrayal. I made up my mind. I was going to kick her out and start over. I didn't want to live in a world where I couldn't trust her, where she'd secretly cheat and lie behind my back just to feel some artificially manufactured joy. I knew that I had to protect myself from this toxic cycle. I had trusted her for too long, and now I saw her for exactly what she was, a manipulator, a liar, someone who hid her own misery behind those fake scores and bitchy attitude. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew I couldn't stay in the same place anymore. I had to walk away from her, from the lies, from the betrayal. It was the hardest decision I'd ever made, but it was also the only way I could reclaim some sense of control. I packed up her belongings, told her to leave, and watched her walk out that door again, this time for good. The feeling was bittersweet. Part of me wanted to feel victorious, but mostly I just felt exhausted. I realized I'd been clinging to a fantasy, a version of our life that was never real. And now I had to start figuring out how to rebuild what I lost. The days after she left were the hardest. The house felt emptier than ever, and every corner seemed to echo with memories I wasn't prepared to face. I had expected relief, maybe, but instead I was overwhelmed with a strange mix of anger, sadness, and a gnawing sense of loss. I kept replaying everything, her lies, the cheating, her manipulative attitude, and wondered how I hadn't seen it sooner. The betrayal ran so deep that I questioned if I'd ever really known her at all. The fake happiness scores, the secret meetings with Eli, her bitchy dismissiveness. None of it made sense until I realized she'd been hiding her true self all along. I spent a lot of time analyzing her behavior, trying to understand what drove her to this point. I came to see her as someone deeply unhappy, but too proud or manipulative to admit she needed help. Instead, she chose to mask her dissatisfaction with her fake scores, her bitchy attitude, and her lies. It was like she had constructed a whole facade to hide her own misery, a misery she'd rather hide than face. I felt foolish for trusting her, but more than that, I felt betrayed. All those years I thought we were building a life together, and it was just a carefully constructed illusion. In the midst of all this, I realized I needed to focus on myself. I finally started going to therapy, trying to work through the anger and grief. I also started reconnecting with friends I'd neglected during the marriage, people who reminded me of who I was before all this chaos. It wasn't easy. Every day was a struggle to resist falling into that dark place of regret and self-doubt. But I knew I had to rebuild, not just my house, but my life. I couldn't let her betrayal define me or keep me trapped in the pain. Meanwhile, I became obsessed with understanding the Social Harmony Initiative and the happiness audit system. I learned that these scores weren't just about measuring well-being. They were about controlling and manipulating people's emotions, forcing them to hide their real feelings. Lisa's artificial ratings were just a symptom of a bigger problem. This entire system was designed to suppress dissent and keep people compliant, even if it meant sacrificing their happiness or honesty. Knowing that made me more determined to find my own truth, to stop living behind a mask. I realized I'd been living in her lie for too long, and I didn't want that anymore. I wanted to be honest, to be real, even if it meant facing pain. The thing I've come to understand is that betrayal cuts deep, but it also teaches you who you really are. I don't regret leaving her. It hurts like hell, but I know I'm better off without the lies and manipulation. I've learned that fake happiness is a trap, a false comfort that ultimately leaves you emptier than before. Moving on has been a slow process, but I'm starting to reclaim my life, step by step, day by day. I still have questions, still wonder about what could have been, but I also know that I deserve honesty, respect, and someone who doesn't hide behind fake scores or lies to feel happy. That's what I want now, truth, raw and unfiltered. And honestly, that's the only way I'll ever be able to trust again. Looking back now, I realize that the entire ordeal taught me more about myself than I ever expected. The betrayal cut so deep because I let myself believe in a version of her that simply wasn't real. The fake happiness scores, the secrecy, the lies, all of it was a shield she used to hide her own dissatisfaction. It's like she was desperately trying to keep up appearances, not just with the world but with herself. And I was so caught up in trying to make things work, I didn't see the cracks widening beneath the surface. Getting out of that relationship was brutal, but it was also the wake-up call I needed. I learned that trust isn't something to take for granted. It's fragile, and once broken, rebuilding it takes more than just apologies. It takes honesty, effort, and most importantly, integrity. Seeing her deceive herself and everyone around her, especially through those bogus happiness ratings, made me realize how dangerous it is to chase illusions. Her life was built on them, and now she's left to deal with the fallout. The biggest lesson I've taken away is that you can't control other people's happiness or honesty, no matter how much you try. You can only control yourself. I've started focusing on what truly matters, my well-being, my boundaries, and my own pursuit of genuine happiness. I don't need someone pretending to be happy while secretly cheating or lying. I deserve real, raw honesty, even if it's uncomfortable. It's better to face the truth and move forward than to live in denial and fake smiles. I'm still healing, still figuring out how to trust again, but I know I'll come out of this stronger. The pain was a harsh lesson, but it pushed me to look inward and reevaluate what I want from life and relationships. I've realized that the most important thing isn't just avoiding betrayal, but understanding my worth and refusing to settle for anything less than genuine honesty. I refuse to be manipulated or deceived again. To anyone reading who might be going through something similar, I'll say this: trust your gut. Don't ignore the little signs, those moments when something feels off or too perfect, because the truth always comes out eventually. And when it does, it's better to face it head-on than to be blindsided and left in the dark. The real happiness isn't in faking a smile or hiding your pain. It's in being true to yourself, no matter how hard that truth might be. That's the only way to find peace.